So the first posture I always love to talk about is mountain pose. It may seem like a really easy posture, but is actually the ultimate foundational posture. And every time I talk about this, I like to send my gratitude out to my friend Christina, who taught this amazing 90-minute workshop just on mountain pose, which blew my mind. We are not going to take 90 minutes to break it down, but know that something that looks so simple can actually be really complex. And I also just want to let you know that over here, you might see a little fuzz. That's my dog, Toby. He's hanging out with me today, so he might make a guest appearance and show us his mountain pose. So if you've never done mountain pose before, I will demonstrate it. It's the one where you're standing on your mats and your arms are usually directly up overhead. They can also be down by your sides as well, depending on who's teaching the class and what variation they want you to take that day. So I will break this down for you from the ground up. So anytime you do a yoga posture, you really want to bring it into your physical body, working from the ground up. It's really difficult to get our upper body in the correct alignment if the bottom part of our body is doing something really funky. It's just not going to happen, okay? So we start with our feet. So in mountain pose, there's really two common ways to stand. One is with your toes together and heels apart just a little bit, and one is with your feet separate. So I want you to go ahead and try that on. Stand in your mountain pose, or just stand with your feet together, and I'm going to turn around so you can see what looks like a little sliver of pie between my heels. So my heels are not actually touching. What happens when my heels touch is that my leg bones turn all the way up into my pelvis and actually bring a compression to my low back, which is never good. You want to avoid that at all costs. So instead of having your heels together, separate your heels and bring your big toes to touch. This will also align the outside edges of your feet with the outside edges of your mat or whatever you're using so they become parallel. If this feels a little unstable in your feet, know that that is really common, and you can absolutely step your feet apart so they're hip width distance. Now, when we say hip width distance, we mean from right underneath your hip bone. So put your hands on your hip bones, feel them, and then imagine drawing a line straight down your thighs through the middle of your kneecaps down to the tops of your toes. That's hip width distance. Some of us ladies have a lot of extra space between our hip bone and the outside of our hip, so we want to stand wide, friends, right underneath your hip bones so that you're stacking your bones and stacking your joints. Also be mindful here of the ever so common toes coming out, especially if you have a dance background or have lived a life where you just sort of stand like this all the time. It's very normal. So work to bring your feet as close to parallel to each other as you can. Then shift your weight forward and back because sometimes, because of injury, bad habits, sometimes our bone structure, we have a tendency to shift our weight more back into our heels or shift our weight forward into our toes. And I'll turn to the side so you can see what that looks like in a human body. So if I'm sitting with my weight back on my heels, here's one common stance. And here's another. People that are really excited, ambitious, want to move forward into something. And side to side as well, especially if you've had knee injuries, ankle injuries, hip injuries, you can have a gentle shift from side to side. It's really normal. I'm telling you, it's not as easy as it sounds, mountain pose, right? All right, so once you get your feet set and your center of gravity between all four corners of your feet, to make this posture super active, think of lifting your kneecaps up. And this will engage your quads, the muscles in the front of your thighs. So try that on, let's drill it. Relax your kneecaps down. Now lift your kneecaps up. Relax them down, lift them up, relax them down, and lift them up. So you want that lift up. So in mountain pose, your energy is going down into your feet and up out of your pelvis. So speaking of pelvises, I'm going to tuck my shirt in for some dramatic effect for you. I'm going to over dramatize two common misalignments in posture. And the way I learned this from the lovely folks at Core Power Yoga are two things. One is cheerleader butt, and the other is cowboy. So try this on with me. Cheerleader butt, cowboy. Cheerleader butt, stick your booty out, do it, I can see you. And cowboy. And somewhere right in between these is your neutral alignment. Okay, so notice the cheerleader butt will bring compression to your low back, and your cowboy draws your shoulders forward and usually your neck forward as well. So it's not really a tuck of the tailbone. You see what that does in my pelvis. It's more of a lengthening of your tailbone down. So you can imagine finding a little bit of extra space through your pelvis as you lift your kneecaps up. And to help support your low back, imagine pulling your low belly in towards your spine so there is abdominal engagement. So you should feel like you're working a lot right here. A fun trick also is if you have a block, let me grab one of mine. If you have a yoga block, which is handy, and I can link on my website where to find props if you feel like you're going to be doing more of a home practice these days. Take the block between your inner thighs. Now your feet will be a little bit further than hip width distance apart. And if you squeeze your block inwards, your tailbone will pretty much naturally lengthen and you'll feel a big engagement in your low belly. Love this, love the block. All right, I'm gonna let this go. Because right now we've only gotten to our hips and I wanna make this a short video, right? But you'll see how it applies to so many other postures. So we have our feet hip width distance or touching with heels separated, knees lifted up, tailbone lengthened down for neutral pelvis. Bring your awareness now to your rib cage. Instead of flaring it out, which from the side will look like a little bend in your back. I'll lift my arms up so you can see if I flare my ribs out. Think of knitting them in towards each other. And then we come to our arms. So a lot of us have a tendency to lift our shoulders up to our ears. This is stress and posture, right? Typing. Bring your shoulders back and down, whether or not you have your arms by your sides or palms face up. So you have a broadening through your chest, your abdominals are engaged, your pelvis is neutral, your thighs are engaged. Now with your arms, if you choose to reach your arms up over his head, and I'm going to do a little kneel down so you can see me. If you reach your arms up overhead, go ahead and do it. Just do it in your own way. Now peek up at your hands. Lots of times palms face forward or hands are sort of drooping. You want to rotate your arm bones, your upper arm bones, so your pinkies actually face in towards each other. And then imagine you have a big beach ball between your arms, so there's actually a little bit of a squeeze in and an engagement here. If you play with the rotation in your arms, palms forward, pinkies together, palms forward, pinkies together, notice what that is doing to your upper back and how that feels. You have a more broad upper back when your pinkies are turned in. Okay, so let's try this on from the bottom to the top. Mountain pose, and then I will show you how this comes back in other yoga postures, which is why we spend a lot of time breaking down mountain pose. All right, so starting with your feet. Your feet can be hip width distance or touching. Either way, both sides of your feet are parallel to the edges of your mat or parallel to each other. Find your center, right and left, forward and back. Lift your kneecaps up so your quads are engaged. Lengthen your tailbone down. Pull your low belly in. Knit your low rib cage together. Hug your shoulders back and down. And if it feels okay, reach your arms up overhead with your pinkies turned in towards each other. Now breathe here. Notice if you're starting to sweat a little bit. That is exactly what you want to have happen. When you hug your muscles to your bones like this, you create stability, you create strength. You begin to move blood and energy throughout your body. So rather than just disengaging and reaching your arms overhead, whatever, make it count, make it work, treat yourself well. Now, Mountain pose is your blueprint posture because you'll see it so many other places. For example, chair pose. I have mountain pose in my torso. You see that? In your high plank, if you do a high plank in your yoga practice, or you're just hanging out at home, high planking away. High plank is mountain pose with your arms in front of you instead of overhead. Even when you come to your warriors, warrior 1, for example, mountain pose in my torso. Warrior 2, mountain pose in my torso. Okay? So everything is based on this one posture. And everything builds from the ground up. And we're always looking for this neutrality in our spine, which is what a mountain pose allows us to do. Lengthening from our tailbone, which is way down here, all the way up to the back of your head, your occipital ridge. You can push your hand right here and feel that long spine, which you'll see in all your postures. And then from there, we have other postures where you fold forward and side to side. But mountain pose is your blueprint. Before you take any of those movements, you find that length and lift. So I hope you enjoyed your mountain pose. Thanks.